Hey guys, tonight we step into a place where time dies slowly, where mercy is not a word, but a rumor, and where the only thing colder than the stone walls is the look you'll get from your jailer. Welcome to your first night in a medieval prison. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The iron door slams shut behind you. The air doesn't move here, it's thick, like soup left out too long. You take your first breath and it tastes like rust, rot, and something you can't place, like old teeth and ancient sorrow. Your eyes adjust slowly, but the dark is stubborn. There's no torchlight, no flickering kindness, just the dim glow of something oozing on the wall, pulsing faintly like a fungus that learned shame. You're in, and you probably won't survive this. The walls are wet, but not with water. They weep. The stones bleed condensation, the byproduct of breath, sweat, and centuries of decay. Beneath your feet, mud and straw form a mat that gives slightly when you step, spongy but not soft. That's not just dirt, it's been absorbing things for years, decades, maybe bodies. Historians still argue whether some dungeons were deliberately layered with the dead for insulation or just lazily neglected until the floor became history itself. There's no bed, of course. What did you expect? A feather mattress? In medieval prisons, bed was whatever you didn't have to fight another inmate for. If you're lucky, someone died in that corner already and left it vacant. You hear something scurry past your foot. It's not a rat. You tell yourself it's not a rat. You tell yourself a lot of things. You're trying not to panic, but your body already knows. It knows you're underground. It knows the air is stale and thick and shared. It knows you're sealed in, like a bad memory someone tried to forget, but never managed to bury deep enough. Welcome to the dungeon. This isn't where you're sent to learn a lesson. This is where you're sent to be unlearned. Now, for the record, not all medieval prisons were dungeons under castles. Some were rooms above gatehouses or towers or even sections of city walls. But tonight you've been thrown into the worst of them, the kind scribes avoided writing about, not because they were forgotten, but because remembering made their hands shake. You feel around, blindly. Your hand lands on something soft, then it moves. You don't scream, but your throat closes. There's a sound behind you, a low cough. Not human, not exactly, but you don't turn around. You don't want to know. Not yet. It's your first night. You'll save the full panic for night 3. You sit, finally. You're back against the wall. Cold leaks into your spine. The stones are alive in a way that stone shouldn't be. Not warm, not sentient, but aware. You're not alone in here. And it's not just other prisoners. You feel watched, and not in a metaphorical way. This cell has seen too much. It remembers the people it swallowed. You imagine the face of the jailer, the man who threw you in here. He had a beard stained with broth and spit, and eyes that didn't blink when he slammed the bolt across the iron door. He didn't ask your name. He didn't care. You weren't a person. You were a noise. You remember the sound of the keys jangling on his hip. There were dozens, maybe hundreds, yet somehow all of them sounded like never. This prison is older than the town above it. It's outlived kings, outlasted plagues. Its walls have been remodeled by despair more than architecture. You start to count your breaths. 1, 2, 3. And then you lose track because someone coughs again, closer this time. In the dark, your ears become your compass. Scrape, shuffle, mumble. Somewhere, someone's whispering something that might be a prayer, or a spell, or a confession. And now the cold doesn't come from the stone anymore. It comes from inside, from the knowledge that whatever this place is, whatever it does, it's working. You're not broken yet, but the cracks have started. And tomorrow, when the jailer opens that door, if he does, you'll thank him. Even if it's to drag you out by your hair, even if it's to hang you by your wrists, because daylight means you're still real. And right now, you're not so sure. Now you know why people went mad in these places, why screams were mistaken for singing, why some prisoners refused to leave when the door opened. Why this place was built not to house criminals, but to erase them. And tonight, it started on you. Sweet dreams. There's a sound tonight that doesn't belong to anything alive. It rattles through the corridor like a prayer said too late. Thin, metallic, drawn out like someone dragging a chain just to let you know they're still here. You hold your breath. Not because you think it'll help, but because the moment you exhale, you're sure someone else will inhale. Someone right behind you. You're not alone in here. That truth settles in like a splinter under skin. The medieval prison system had many flaws, but none more consistent than this. Overcrowding. You were never meant to have the cell to yourself. Space was a luxury reserved for those wealthy enough to bribe for it. You get a roommate, or 5, or if it's a particularly busy harvest season and the Lord's had a bad day, 14. The air tastes different now. Worse. It's thicker, more acidic. Less like decay and more like people. Bodies left unwashed, breath left unbrushed, shame left to ferment. There's something deeply human about the scent of desperation, and tonight, you're learning to identify it by the molecule. In the corner, someone shifts. You hear chains clink, but they're not being worn, they're being played with. Welcome to medieval bunkmates. People who've been in here so long that a rusted chain link is more familiar than their own name. People like Wulfric. That's the name you'll learn later, once he finally speaks. For now, he's just a silhouette with hands like old rope and eyes you won't dare to meet. Wulfric's been here 7 winters. No charges, no trial. He doesn't even remember why he was arrested. He tells you later, without sarcasm, that it might have been for stepping on the wrong side of the parish line, or looking suspicious during church, or owning too many onions. Historians still argue what counted as criminal behavior in certain regions because record-keeping was more suggestion than science. One thing is certain, if someone important pointed at you, the dungeon pointed back. The space you're sharing is barely larger than a horse stall. There's a corner for waste, if you're lucky. There's no light, no division, and no privacy. The walls don't echo so much as absorb. You could scream for hours and it would never reach the surface. Some did. The others got tired of it. That's why no one screams anymore. You inch further from the corner, but there's no further. Just closer to something else. There's another shape now. Elsbeth. You don't see her, not really, but you hear her muttering. Not to herself, no. To someone she lost. Maybe a child, maybe a husband, maybe the version of herself who still had a future. Elsbeth has been here since spring of 1349. She remembers the plague, not because it killed someone she loved, but because it didn't kill her. She was accused of witchcraft after surviving 2 waves, a healer once, now just bones with breath. Elsbeth laughs sometimes. It's not cheerful, it's the kind of laugh that used to be a sob. This is the company you keep, and you don't talk to them. Not yet. You don't ask why they're here, because the answer might be too close to your own. You just listen. To the coughs, to the prayers, to the scratching, always the scratching. Someone's carving something into stone with a bone fragment. You don't want to know who. But at some point you lean your head back, you close your eyes, and you pray for sleep. That's when the whispering starts. It's not directed at you. Not tonight. It's between the others. Trading scraps of dreams, piecing together what they remember of sunlight. They talk about bread, not real bread, memory bread. One man describes rye with a reverence usually reserved for saints. Another mutters about cheese in Latin like a holy rite. Wulfric remembers what soup used to smell like, and Elsbeth hums a tune so old it makes your spine ache. It's a lullaby. You think you've heard it before, but maybe she's just planting it in your head now for safekeeping. Time doesn't pass in this place. It swells, it thickens, it stretches out into a blanket of now that never ends. And the people in here, they become part of the walls. Not metaphorically, sometimes literally. You notice that in the stones themselves, faces are carved, not by artisans, not by order of the crown, but by inmates, desperate to mark time, or identity, or just to prove they existed. One face looks like it's screaming. Another is smiling, but the mouth is too wide, like someone tried to remember what smiling felt like but got it wrong. These are your companions now. You still haven't been told your sentence. You still haven't seen a judge. You still don't know how long you'll be here. And the others? They don't count days. They count silences. The longer the quiet lasts between new screams, the deeper your body sinks into the floor. The dungeon accepts you. The others do too. Wulfric finally speaks, not to say hello, but to say one sentence: they only feed us when someone new dies. You think it's a joke. You laugh. No one else does. Elsbeth stops humming. The scratching pauses, and for the first time since you arrived, you realize they've been waiting for you, not to talk to, not to save, but to replace. You wake up because someone is already staring at you. It's not paranoia. It's protocol. In medieval prisons, there's no concept of privacy, not even in sleep, especially not in sleep. Because sleep is when you're weakest, and weakness is currency here. Every blink, every flinch, every toss in the straw-matted corner is a withdrawal from your survival account. You open your eyes slowly. Wulfric hasn't moved, but he's still watching. And behind him, in the darker part of the cell where the light never quite touches, someone else is breathing, not snoring, not coughing, just breathing. Long, deliberate, wet breaths, like someone sucking marrow out of a memory. There are no introductions in here. Names don't matter. Time erases them anyway. But you'll hear whispers later about a man called Torvin. He's been chained here longer than you've been alive. He murdered someone once, maybe, probably. But that's not what people fear about Torvin. It's that he talks in rhyme. All the time. And sometimes the things he says rhyme with the future. Historians still argue whether madness in medieval prisons was a symptom, a punishment, or a design feature. You're leaning toward the latter. The food arrives, or rather it's dropped through a slot too small for mercy. A wooden bowl skids across the stone, stopping just shy of your foot. Its contents? Unclear. Something gray. Something wet. Something you hope wasn't moving when it was poured. No spoons, just fingers. And you better be quick, because Wulfric is already sitting up, and Elsbeth, brittle as she looks, moves fast when hungry. You hesitate, not out of politeness, out of self-preservation. This might be a test. The first person to reach for food sometimes becomes the second course. Instead, you push the bowl slightly toward the middle. Neutrality, shared suffering. Wulfric nods once. That's how alliances form here. In gestures, in restraint. In the understanding that dignity is a group hallucination you're all clinging to together. Torvin doesn't eat, he just murmurs. Something about 2 steps forward, 1 to the grave, then laughs softly and disappears again into the corner. Later, you find out he's the only one who's been released. Twice. He came back on his own both times. You ask why. Elsbeth answers, because out there, people look at you. In here, you're invisible, and that starts to feel safer. You weren't supposed to be here more than a few days. That's what the bailiff said. But he said it without looking at you, and the ink on your arrest warrant was already smeared. Your crime? Still unclear. You remember the market, the shouting, the dropped coin purse, the way the guards grabbed you without asking questions. You remember the cuffs, the wagon, the smell of the jailer. But mostly, you remember the silence that followed. No one came looking for you. That's what hurts the most. No pounding on the door, no tearful inquiries, not even a rumor. You were missed the way a pebble is missed from a riverbed, and now you sit in the dark, waiting for a voice that isn't coming. In medieval England, prisoners were often held without formal charges for months, sometimes years. Some never saw a judge. The system wasn't designed for justice, it was designed for control. Punishment wasn't the end of the process, it was the beginning. And in here, punishment isn't fire and whips. It's time. Time wears through the brain faster than any blade. You try to count the days, but day and night mean nothing. There's no sun, no moon, just moisture and cold. So you count in coughs, in bowl drops, in new faces, though they come less frequently now. You start to wonder if you're the last new one, if you're the last story added to this forgotten ledger. And then, one morning, the door opens. Light slices the room in half like a sword. You wince. Your skin doesn't remember what light feels like. 2 guards enter. They don't say who they're here for. They just point. It's Wulfric. He doesn't argue, he just stands. You've never seen him vertical before. He's taller than you thought. They don't tell him where he's going, and he doesn't ask. But before they drag him out, he looks at you. Not with fear, not with hope, with envy. Because you're still in here. And out there, it's something worse. You watch them disappear down the corridor. The sound of his chains fades, and then nothing. Just the scraping in the wall again. Just the silence of Elsbeth picking at the edge of her blanket like it owes her answers. Just the breath of Torvin, still rhyming to no one. And now, one less body between you and the door. You don't feel relief. You feel replacement. Because in here, every departure is a promotion, and you just got moved up. You don't hear from Wulfric again. Not a sound, not a scream, not a thud, and that's what haunts you, because it means the worst might not be pain. It might be nothing. Just disappearance. Quiet as a last breath in the dark, you stare at the space where he used to sit. It's colder now, not just physically, spiritually, as if the air itself noticed the vacancy and decided to fold in on it, make it tighter, like the cell is shrinking around you. Elsbeth hasn't spoken since. She's been humming again. A different tune now, slower, more broken. You can't place the melody, but it has the feeling of a goodbye wrapped in regret. You ask her what happened to Wulfric. She doesn't answer, just this soft laugh, dry, like crumpled parchment. Then she says, he's free now, in the same way a candle is free when it burns out. You don't sleep that night, because now you realize that leaving isn't something to hope for, it's something to fear. The jailer comes by at dawn. You hear the rattle of his keys. There's no pattern. Sometimes he walks past, sometimes he pauses, sometimes he stops. Today he stops. He opens the door just enough to let light in, then throws something onto the floor. A bucket. You know what it's for. There's no explanation, no instructions, no glance. He walks away, and just like that, your humanity has been outsourced to a tin pail. You're starting to forget your name. You repeat it in your head sometimes, not because you need to remember it, but because you need to remember that you had one. Identity is slippery down here. The dungeon doesn't take it all at once. It peels it piece by piece, like old wax off a candle. First, your name, then your sense of time, then the belief that you'll ever use either again. You want to scream, but there's no point. You tried that on your third day, or maybe your fifth. The others just looked at you like you'd broken the rule, because you had. The rule is simple. Hope quietly, or not at all. You start watching the walls more. They're full of etchings, lines, symbols, the kind of scratches people make when they've run out of words but still need to be heard. You find one that looks like a fish, or maybe a cross with an extra tail. Torvin says it's the mark of the forgotten. He claims if you trace it with your finger while whispering your name, the cell will remember you even when no one else does. You try it, not because you believe him, because you need to believe something. The stone feels colder where it's carved. That night, you dream of a hallway with no end, lined with doors that all look like yours. You open them one by one, and inside every cell is you. Slightly older, slightly thinner, slightly more broken. You wake up shaking. Elsbeth offers you a piece of cloth she's been chewing. Says it helps with the nerves. You decline. You're still trying to draw a line between what's survival and what's surrender, but that line gets blurrier every hour. The food today is worse than usual. You think there's hair in it. You eat it anyway, because hunger has no dignity, just demands. Later, a new sound. Not footsteps. Hooves. Someone's arriving. The entire dungeon seems to hold its breath. Then, voices. Foreign. Higher pitched. Educated. You don't understand the words, but you recognize the tone. Someone important has entered a world they've only heard about in sermons and nightmares. A visitor. Rare. Dangerous. Because visits mean decisions, and decisions mean consequences. Torvin stops rhyming. Elsbeth crosses herself. You don't move. You hear them approach the neighboring cells, talking about something. A ledger? A list? Then, a pause. You hear paper, pages turning. A man clears his throat. This one? He asks someone. Then footsteps, closer, keys. Yours. The door opens slowly. It's not the jailer this time. It's a man in a robe too clean for this place. He looks at you like you're already dead. behind him, a boy with ink-stained fingers scribbles your name onto something. That name you almost forgot. "Stand," the man says. Your legs argue. You win. Barely. They don't say where you're going, they don't say why, they just pull you forward, and for the first time in what feels like a century, you leave the cell. The corridor burns your eyes. Not because it's bright, but because it exists. You forgot there were other places. You walk past other cells. Faces appear behind bars like ghosts in paintings, each one silently asking the same thing. Why not me? You keep walking. Your heart has remembered how to beat again. But your hope hasn't. Not yet. Not until you know where you're going. And even then, maybe not. Because you've seen too much in the dark, you've become part of it, and you're not sure the light wants you anymore. They take you upstairs. That alone is enough to make your knees tremble, not from weakness, but from surprise. You'd forgotten up was even an option. Everything in the dungeon moves downward. Emotion, dignity, your spine. The staircase is narrow, slick with moss, and barely lit by a dying torch. You trail behind the scribe and the robed man, whose names you still haven't been given. Maybe they think you don't need to know. Maybe they think you won't live long enough for it to matter. At the top of the stairs, you reach a chamber that smells different, like ink, oil, and something resembling bread. It's not a courtroom, it's a holding hall, just another stone room, but one with a table, parchment, and a few too many eyes. The man in the robe, he finally speaks again. "Name," he says without looking up. You open your mouth. It sticks. The word doesn't come out immediately. You're not sure it's yours anymore. The boy scribbles something regardless. The man continues, "You've been accused of theft. Suspicion only. No witness, no confession." You try to respond, maybe to protest, maybe just to blink like a functioning human being. But your voice cracks in half. He finally looks up at you as if just realizing you're real. He frowns. "You're weaker than I expected." You almost laugh. Welcome to medieval law, where suspicion is enough, where evidence is a luxury, where your trial is determined by how useful or inconvenient your existence might be to someone above you. They say you've been given a chance. Not freedom, a chance. A hearing will be held. Soon. No date, no hour. Just soon. You're allowed to wash, if you can call it that. A basin of cold water, murky enough to reflect but not enough to see your eyes in it. You wash anyway, because you'd forgotten what clean skin felt like. They give you new clothes. Well, different clothes. A sackcloth tunic that smells like hay and regret. But it doesn't itch like your old one. They leave you alone in the chamber. The candle flickers low. And for a moment, just a moment, you feel like maybe, just maybe something is shifting. But you know better. Because Torvin once got this far, so did Wulfric. And you remember what happened to them. Still, your body can't help itself. It sits straighter. Your thoughts arrange themselves into proper lines instead of spirals. You remember your name again. You say it to yourself 3 times, quietly. It fits. Not perfectly, but it fits. Then the robed man returns. He informs you that your hearing has been delayed. The magistrate is hunting. He'll be back in a few days. Your stomach drops. You've just been introduced to the concept of limbo, the unofficial holding period for prisoners awaiting hearings that never seem to arrive. Some prisoners in 14th century Europe waited months. Others waited until their accusers died. Some outlived their own judges. Historians still debate whether this was systemic failure or strategic cruelty. You're taken to a different cell this time. It's smaller than the last. No other prisoners, just you. At first you're relieved. Privacy. But then the silence sets in. Not the noise-filled silence of a shared dungeon cell. This is real silence. You hear your own breath too clearly. Your own heartbeat sounds accusatory. The walls are smoother here. No graffiti, no markings, no history to keep you company. You miss Wulfric. You miss Elsbeth. Even Torvin. You miss the madness that filled the empty space. Because now, there's just you. And that's louder than anything else. Days pass, or maybe hours. Time is sticky again, warped, dripping from the ceiling in slow-motion seconds. You're brought stale bread once a day. It arrives on the floor. No bowl. You eat it on instinct. You drink from the same basin where you washed your face. You try to sleep. You wake up unsure if you ever did. And all the while, the idea of a hearing floats in front of you like a carrot on a string. Unreachable, unguaranteed. Then, finally, footsteps. Heavy, confident. Not jailer steps. Not servant scurries. Boots, 3 knocks on the door. The bolt slides, and in steps someone new. A man with a robe too red and rings too heavy. He smells of hunting dogs and cooked meat. The magistrate. He glances at you like he's examining a rug. He doesn't sit. He just asks one question. Do you deny the theft? You blink, then nod. Once. He narrows his eyes. No confession then. It's not a question. He nods to someone outside the room. And just like that, your fate is sealed. You're not sentenced. You're processed. There is no trial, no audience, no defense, no appeal. You are marched to the back of the holding chamber. There, on the stone wall, is a ring of iron. Your wrist is shackled to it, just one hand. Your legs remain free, but the wall is your new spine now. You'll sit there for 3 days, waiting for the public stocks to become available. Until then, you wait. With rats, with echoes, with nothing. And yet, somehow, even now, you're not surprised, because you knew deep down, the moment they opened the first cell door, this wasn't rescue, it was rerouting. You're still in the dungeon, the walls just got fancier. You're not shackled by both wrists, just one, and that's supposed to be merciful. The ring set into the wall is too low to stand but too high to lie down, so you sit, legs cramping, back bent, body aching in shapes you've never been. You lean your head back against the cold stone. The pressure is a relief, a reminder that you're still made of skin and bone, that you're still here. Above you, somewhere in the building, someone's singing. Not well, not even in tune. But the sound is thin and warm like sunlight leaking through a crack you forgot to look for. It doesn't last long. The door slams upstairs and the voice cuts off. Silence. That kind of silence again, the kind that thickens. You lose track of time. That's starting to be your thing. Maybe the sun came up. Maybe it didn't. Your cell doesn't have a window, just a slit too narrow for light and too high for hope. Eventually, the jailer brings food. Well, his version of food. A heel of bread that might have been chewed by something else first. And a ladle of water so still it might have memories. You eat. Because that's what you do now. Not because you're hungry, but because hunger is easier to manage than madness. At least with hunger, there's a script. Find food, chew food, survive. But with madness, it just sneaks in, takes your thoughts out for a walk and returns with them out of order. You start talking to the iron ring. You name it. Hugh. You don't know why. It feels right. Hugh is always there. Cold, dependable, consistent. The magistrate hasn't returned, neither has the robed man, or the boy. You start to think you imagine them. Or maybe you died and this is the holding chamber before judgment. But no, your stomach aches, your wrists bleed. That's too real. Pain is real. It keeps you tethered. The door opens again, you flinch, but it's not a face you recognize. She's young, too young. She carries a bundle of cloth, not food, sets it on the ground, doesn't speak. You blink. She doesn't leave right away, just stands there watching you. Then quietly she says, "You smell like rot." You almost smile, almost, because it's the first honest sentence anyone said to you in days. She leaves without another word. The cloth bundle? Clean rags? For your wounds? Maybe? Or for the guards to clean their boots with? You use them anyway, because sometimes comfort is found in the illusion of care. The next day or hour, who knows, a man is dragged in. Literally dragged. His face is swollen, lips cracked, one eye gone to blood. You hear the words, "confession pending." They shackle him to the ring next to yours. He groans but doesn't speak. You learn his name from the guards. Fenton. He's accused of poaching a deer from the magistrate's forest. He swears he didn't. You don't ask. You've learned that asking doesn't help. But he talks anyway. About his wife, his baby, his dog, his orchard. He's trying to remember what it felt like to be alive. You listen. Because that's what you can give him. The next morning, or what passes for morning, Fenton is gone. The ring hangs empty. The floor is sticky. You ask the jailer where they took him. He just looks at you and says, "Don't get used to anyone." You don't respond, because you already hadn't. The stalks open up. That's what you're told. Like it's a seat at the theater. And you're the show. They unshackle you from Hugh. Your wrist has bruised in the shape of old iron. It throbs in time with your heartbeat, a dull rhythm you can't ignore. You're walked to the square, and when the sun hits your face for the first time in, what, weeks, it blinds you. It burns. You cry from the brightness, and the crowd thinks it's fear. They cheer. They laugh. They throw things. You're seated in the wooden stocks like a prop in a morality play, head and hands locked in place. Someone spits. Someone else yells your name. Mispronounced, but it still stings. A boy throws a turnip. It hits your shoulder. A girl throws bread. It misses. You're on display, but not for your crime, for your lesson. This is how the town remembers you. Not by your life, not by your deeds, but by your stillness, your humiliation, by your silence in the stocks. You stay there for 6 hours, or 10. You don't know. Your body goes from pain to numbness to something else entirely. You start to forget your arms are yours. The crowd moves on. The sun sets. You're pulled out of the wood. You collapse. They don't catch you. You're dragged back to a new cell. Smaller. You know what that means now. You've been processed. You're no longer awaiting trial. You're a known quantity. You are now part of the dungeon's furniture. Like Hugh. Like Torvin was. Like Wulfric before you. They leave you there. No more hearings. No more visitors. Just cold walls and the memory of the stocks. You lie on your side and whisper the only sentence that feels true anymore. I was here. No one answers. But stones remember, and for now, that will have to be enough. You forget what your voice sounds like, not because you've lost it, but because no one gives you a reason to use it. There's no conversation in this cell, no gossip, no prayer chain, no half-mad man reciting prophecies in rhyme. No Elspeth humming lullabies for ghosts, just you. Just breathing. Just bones on stone. You used to think the silence was unbearable. Now you understand it was a privilege. The dungeon doesn't scream at you anymore. It listens. And in that stillness it begins to reshape you. Your thoughts come slower. Your dreams darker. Sometimes you see your childhood home. The smell of fresh hay. The hum of bees over sun-warmed earth. But when you try to step forward in the dream, your legs won't move, they're shackled. And the sun fades fast. You wake up biting your tongue. You feel your teeth sink in and you don't stop right away. The pain reminds you there's still something to wake up from. That's the thing no one tells you. The worst part of medieval prison isn't the rats, or the filth, or the beatings. It's what happens when the world forgets you. And worse, what happens when you start to forget yourself. You know now what happened to Wulfric. What happened to Torvin? They didn't die all at once. They disappeared one memory at a time. Your name is starting to blur at the edges, like ink on parchment left out in the rain. You try to say it out loud at night, but the syllables feel foreign. You replace it with numbers. 14 steps from the back wall to the door. 7 slats in the wooden beam above your head. 3 cracks that cross the stone beside your straw. You begin to count everything you can, because counting is structure. And structure is hope, dressed in disguise. You count your breaths. You count the times the jailer passes your door. You count the number of times you don't cry when he does. You lose track sometimes, but you start again. 1, 2, 3, because it's better than counting down. The food has changed. You think, or maybe your stomach has. What used to gag you now settles like a strange comfort. The rot is familiar. The sourness expected. Sometimes you think you smell herbs, garlic, onion, your mother's stew, but it's just your imagination sharpening its fangs. The body adapts. The mind, not so much. You begin talking to yourself again, out loud now. Just small things. I am real. I was not born here. I walked under the sun. I kissed someone once. It helps, until it doesn't. One morning, if you can call it morning, the door opens without warning. The light floods in, but not from a torch, from the sun, actual daylight. For a moment your brain rejects it. It burns too hot, too fast. You shield your eyes and squint at the figure in the doorway. Not a jailer, not a magistrate, a stranger, young, wide-eyed, dressed too clean, an assistant maybe? They say one sentence. You're being moved. You don't respond, because you don't know how to feel. Is this release? Is this punishment? Is this a mistake? You don't ask. You're too scared the question will reset the clock. You're pulled to your feet. Your legs fail. They carry you. Your body feels light. Too light. Like something that hasn't been used properly in weeks. You blink as the light grows brighter, and then you see it. A cart. Not a fancy one, just wood and wheels, but it's headed somewhere not made of stone. That alone feels holy. You're placed in the back, no chains, no shackles, no guards, just you. And movement. The road is bumpy, your teeth rattle. You don't care. Trees flash past, actual trees. You forgot they move like that, tall, swaying, alive. The cart stops outside a wooden gate. You're pulled down gently, led into a building that smells of soap. Not herbs, not mold. Soap. Inside is a man, old, pale, robed. He looks you over and makes a note on a parchment. Condition, stable, malnourished, no visible infection. He nods. This one'll do. You don't ask what he means. You can't. Your throat is dry, but later you'll learn you've been transferred, not released, to a workhouse. Still confined, still watched, but no more shackles, no more cells. Just work. Unpaid, grueling, endless work. And that's freedom compared to what came before. You wash for the first time. The dirt runs off in streaks that look like paint. The water turns brown, then gray, then black. You scrub until your skin hurts, then you keep scrubbing, because you're not trying to get clean, you're trying to find yourself under the layers. You eat. Warm bread, real bread. It tastes like a sin. You sleep on straw, but clean straw, and you sleep for more than an hour at a time. No rats. No whispers. No Elsbeth. No Wulfric. Just dreams. And not the bad kind. The kind that make you cry when you wake up, not because they scared you, but because they reminded you who you used to be. You're not free, but you're not buried either. And in this world, that might be as good as it gets. The workhouse isn't a reprieve, it's just a different kind of prison, one that smiles as it breaks you. There are no chains here, no iron rings, no damp stone corridors echoing with lost names, but you're still not free. You wake up before dawn to the sound of a handbell, one high-pitched ring that splits the sky open like lightning without the flash. You rise like instinct, not because you're ready, but because not rising means punishment. And punishment here is quieter, more bureaucratic, but no less brutal. The day starts with porridge, if you can call it that. It's warm at least, but it's mostly water with the memory of oats. You don't complain. Complaining is something people with futures do. You eat with a group now. Other former prisoners, peasants, orphans, and the nameless. All hunched over their bowls like monks praying for a god that no longer makes rounds in this part of the kingdom. Some don't speak at all. Others won't stop. You keep your eyes low and your mouth shut. You learn quickly that survival in the workhouse runs on silence and obedience. Your first task is spinning wool. They give you a spindle and a lump of raw fleece that smells like rain-soaked livestock and old church pews. Your fingers ache from the stiffness. You drop the spindle 3 times. The supervisor watches, says nothing. The 4th time, he walks over, takes your hand gently, and presses it down, just once, against the corner of the workbench. The wood splinters. So does your thumbnail. He walks away, you understand the lesson. Later, you meet Father Berwin. He runs the place, or at least oversees it. Thin, angular, with eyes like well-polished flint. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. He's the kind of man whose stillness carries the weight of authority. He speaks to you only once that day. You'll work your way back to usefulness, he says, as if usefulness is a ladder you fell off of, and this is your chance to climb again. You nod, because there's nothing else to do. The day grinds on. You spin wool. You stack crates. You sweep stone floors until your palms sting. By the time the bell rings for supper, your spine feels like it's been unspooled and rewound with wire. But you eat. Bread and broth, simple, saltless. But enough. At night, you're led to a bunk. Wood frame, straw mattress, thin blanket. You stare at the ceiling, where a single candle casts shadows like ghosts crossing through one last judgment. And you realize something awful. You miss the dungeon. Not all of it, not the cold, not the smell, not the pain, but the certainty. In the dungeon, you knew where you stood. You were nothing, no illusions, no delusions, just survival. pure and stripped. Here they offer hope like it's a game, like if you follow the rules well enough, you might earn your way back to society. But no one says how long that takes. No one tells you what the goalposts look like. They just watch, and wait, and measure. You don't dream that night, you're too tired. But in the morning, something happens, something unexpected. A letter, not addressed to you by name, of course not. It just has your bunk number. Inside, a single sheet of parchment, handwritten, neat, familiar. You recognize the handwriting. Elsbeth. You don't know how she managed it, how she found a way to send word, how she even knew where you'd been taken. But there it is. Her message is short. Still here. Still humming. Don't forget the names. That's it. You read it a dozen times. And then you hide it in your tunic like a secret too valuable for daylight. Elsbeth is alive, and she remembers you. And suddenly your spine straightens. Just a little. Because in a world built to erase you, being remembered is rebellion. You go back to work that day with something different in your chest. Not joy. Not confidence, but defiance. Quiet, steady. You spin the wool faster. You lift the crates with more control. You count the cracks in the floor again, because those cracks are yours now. No one sees the change. Not yet. But you do, and that's enough to survive another day. Because now, you carry two truths with you. That the world forgot you once, and that someone found you anyway. You begin counting sunrises. They seep in through a high, dust-covered window near the rafters of the workhouse. Each morning, a sliver of gold drips down the far wall like a hesitant blessing. You count that light like it matters, like it's proof the world still moves, even if you're standing still. 14 sunrises since the letter from Elsbeth. No more notes since, no sign she's alive, or free, or even still in the same place. You whisper her name sometimes, like a charm, like a spell. It helps. Your body's starting to harden from the labor. Your hands look like bark, cracked, lined, unrecognizable. You lift, you spin, you scrub, day in, day out. They don't beat you anymore. But they don't thank you either. You're functional now. And in this place, that's the highest compliment you'll get. One day, they send you to the orchard. A real one, with sun and trees and wind. At first you think it's a trick, but no. There's a broken gate, a crumbling wall. They need hands. And you have hands. You rake the ground, you gather fallen branches, you taste the air. It tastes like the world before the cell, before the stalks, before the silence. And it makes your knees weak. Another man works beside you, older, slower, skin like leather soaked in ale. You don't speak, until he does. You from the dungeon? He asks it like someone asking if you've seen war. You nod. He nods back. Says, thought so. You move like someone who's seen the bottom. You don't know whether to feel insulted or understood. You settle on grateful. His name is Odo. He tells you he was once a blacksmith, then a thief, then a scapegoat. He's been here for 7 years. No release. No sentencing. Just usefulness. He teaches you how to harvest without tearing the roots, how to twist your grip to avoid splitting the bark. Little things, tiny mercies. It feels like learning how to be human again. That night, you sleep without dreaming. The next morning, you're sent back inside. The overseer assigns you to the storeroom. You sort flour, measure sacks. You don't speak unless spoken to, but you're watching, listening. You learn which keys hang where, which ones disappear for an hour then come back. You start imagining maps in your head, layouts of rooms, doors, gates. Not because you plan to escape, not yet. Just because imagining the possibility makes your mind feel wider, less caged. Then one afternoon, you're sweeping near the front corridor and hear something. A name. Yours. You freeze. Someone said your name. Not you. Not him. Your actual name. You turn your head slowly. A man in a dark coat, traveling boots, clean face, but dusty shoulders. He's speaking to Father Berwin. You can't hear everything, just fragments. From the north, says he's been looking. 3 years. No body, just records. Then your name again. Berwin glances in your direction. The man turns. You don't recognize him. He stares. Then his eyes widen. He takes a step forward. But Berwin raises a hand. The man stops. Berwin says something low, firm. The man nods and leaves. Just like that. You're sent back to your bunk early that night. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling. Was he real? Was that your brother? Your cousin? Your neighbor? Someone who remembered? Or was it just your mind, hungry for salvation, inventing witnesses? You never find out. But something has changed. The next day, your work is doubled. You're moved off orchard duty. No more sunlight, just storage. You ask no questions, because the last time you noticed the outside world, it tried to notice you back. And the workhouse, it doesn't like that. That week, you get another letter, but this time, it's not from Elsbeth. It's unsigned, just one sentence. They won't let you leave. No explanation, no context, but you understand. You understand perfectly. You're not a prisoner, you're property. Useful, docile, predictable, and that's worth more than justice. So you write a letter back. You scratch it into a piece of flour paper with a splinter dipped in broth. You fold it tight, and you slide it under the storeroom door. You don't know if it'll be found. You don't know who'll read it. But it says one thing: I'm still here, I still remember. You fall asleep gripping the memory of that note like a blade. You're not broken yet, you're not gone yet, and tomorrow, you'll count the sunrise again. You've stopped hoping for release, but you haven't stopped watching. That's the difference now. Hope expects. But watching is survival. You count the guards, how they shift, when they grow bored, which ones take longer at their post because their boots hurt or their wives hate them. You file it all away. You even know which rat sneaks into the pantry first. Her name is Emmeline. You gave her that name on a particularly long afternoon when the silence was so thick you thought your ears had stopped working. She's missing half a tail and walks with a limp, but she's fast and smarter than she has to be. You respect that. You've learned to respect a lot of things lately. Slowness, silence, stillness. Your world runs on low volume now, but then something loud happens. Berwin calls you by name, not your bunk number, your name, out loud. You stop mid-step, so does everyone else in the room. He asks you to follow him. You do, because what else is there? He takes you to the same chamber where you arrived, same stone floor, same high window leaking cold light, but there's someone waiting there. A woman, older, well-dressed but travel-worn. She holds a letter in one hand, a satchel in the other. She says your name, and you feel it wrap around your ribs like a rope pulling you home. She's from the north, from your town, from the place you forgot how to describe. She says your sister has been looking for you, for years, that records were wrong, that someone forged something, that a bribe was paid for your silence, back when silence was cheap. You feel the room tilt. You ask her one question: can I go? She doesn't answer right away. Instead, she turns to Berwin. He looks uncomfortable, like a man who's just realized the cattle he's been feeding might actually speak. She hands him the letter. He reads it, then sighs. Fine, he says, release him, but mark the ledger. You're not sure what that means. She is. It means you're technically free, but not clean. You'll carry the mark, a line in a book somewhere saying you were once theirs, and that if you return, they get to keep you. You don't care. You're already stepping toward the door. You don't even realize you're crying until she says, don't run, walk, and you do. Step by step, out the door, into light, actual light. Not a crack, not a flicker, but sun, wide and honest and brutal in its warmth. It burns your eyes, your hands shake, your knees buckle, but you keep walking. Through the gate, down the road, past the old orchard, past the old workhouse walls, until the stone is behind you, and for the first time in longer than you can measure, you're not owned by anything. You sleep that night in a real bed. It creaks when you shift, the sheets are rough, but clean, and the pillow doesn't smell like mold. You sleep for 12 hours. When you wake, your first thought isn't of the cell, it's of the sky. Blue, sprawling, pointless in its beauty. You lie there for a while, just watching it move, and later, when you're asked what it was like, back there, you don't know what to say. How do you explain silence that bruises, or time that melts? How do you put words to what it felt like to forget the sound of your own name, and then hear someone say it with kindness? You just shake your head, and you say the only thing that feels true. I wouldn't last a day in that place again. But you did. You lasted more than a day. You lasted through the dark, through the cold, through the forgetting. You lasted until the world remembered you. And now, you remember too. You remember everyone: Wulfric, Elsbeth, Torvin, Odo, the cracks in the wall, the song in the silence. You remember the worst of it, so you can survive the best of it. And tonight, as you fall asleep beneath a roof instead of a stone ceiling, you say their names once more, just to make sure they stay alive in the only place that ever really mattered, inside someone who made it out. The next morning, you wake up afraid it was all a dream. You stare at the ceiling and wait for the stone, the dripping, the ring in the wall, but it's just wood, beams, dust, dancing in a sunbeam like lazy spirits. You breathe deeply, and it doesn't smell like mold. No sour cloth, no sweat, no waste, just the faint scent of old bread and clean straw. You sit up slowly as if your body is unsure of its own freedom. The floor is cold but dry, solid. You place both feet down and count to 3 before you try to stand, just to be safe. 1, 2, 3. You rise. No one shouts, no bell rings, no iron slams behind you. And that's when it hits you. The rules are gone. There are no guards here, no curfew, no rations. You can speak, you can move, you can even walk outside if you want to. You want to. You leave the small room you were given, more a storeroom than a home, but still, it has a door, a window, a future. Outside, the village is quiet, small cottages, tilled soil, the kind of place where chickens run loose and no one locks their doors because they all know the value of honesty, or at least the cost of being caught. You walk past the well and toward the hill, because from there you can see everything. The workhouse is still visible, off in the distance, smaller now, diminished, like a memory fading at the edges. And beyond that, fields, woods, a road that goes somewhere, anywhere. And for a second, you're overwhelmed, because you can go. You could walk away and never stop, but something roots you here. You don't know what it is yet. You meet people over the next few days, kind for the most part, curious. Some are distant, your past still clinging to you like smoke from a fire long put out. Others nod. They've seen the inside of those walls too. There's a shared look in your eyes now, a fatigue that runs deeper than the bones, a hunger that isn't for food, but for time lost, for names forgotten, for the sound of your own footsteps not being followed. You take a job as a cleaner in the chapel. It pays in bread, sometimes cheese, always quiet. You clean carefully, deliberately, like erasing your past one sweep at a time. And every night before bed, you whisper their names again: Wulfric, Elsbeth, Torvin, Odo, Fenton, and that girl with the bundle of cloth who told you the truth. You smell like rot. She wasn't wrong. But the rot is leaving now. Slowly. You no longer dream of cells. Now you dream of windows, of open air, of second chances. One evening you return from the chapel and find a letter waiting. Folded, clean, tucked under a small, smooth rock on your doorstep. It's unsigned. It says the magistrate fell from his horse, broke his neck. No one wept. You read it 3 times, then you burn it. Not out of fear, but out of closure. Because you don't need to carry that weight anymore. Justice didn't come by hand, but it came. And now you can begin something new. You start teaching a boy in the village how to read. His name is Edgar. He's missing 2 teeth and asks too many questions, but he listens. And one day he asks you what a dungeon is. You take a long breath and you tell him the truth, a place where you forget you're alive until someone reminds you. He nods, slowly, then goes back to tracing letters. You smile because you're still here, still remembering. And now, you're passing it on. The seasons begin to turn. Leaves bronze and fall, slow and silent like secrets no longer needed. The wind sharpens its edge, the days shrink, and yet something inside you stretches. You've started measuring your life by something new. Peace. It comes in flickers at first, a moment where your shoulders aren't clenched, a morning where you forget to flinch at the sound of footsteps, a bowl of soup you eat without first checking for mold. You don't trust it, not yet, but you notice it. You've taken to walking the long road that runs past the village gate. It leads nowhere special, just fields and the echo of things that aren't hunting you anymore. Every so often, you see travelers, merchants, monks, once a nobleman's retinue gliding by like a river of silk and dust. You watch from a distance, hands tucked into sleeves, and wonder if any of them have ever slept beside a stone wall listening for the next cough to signal if a cellmate survived the night. Probably not, but you don't envy them. They look polished, you look proven. Sometimes you pass the orchard, the one behind the old wall where you once gathered sticks with Odo. It's quiet now, the trees are bare but standing, still here, like you. A boy throws a rock near your foot one morning, then runs, laughing. You don't chase, you smile, because that's what boys are supposed to do. A part of you is still amazed that the world just continues. That somewhere, while you were locked in a place with no sky, people were laughing, farming, falling in love, and now you are too. Not in the romance sense, not yet, but in the act of simply being, of being here, of waking up, of washing your face in clean water. You keep cleaning the chapel. It's a simple job, but each day as you sweep and wipe and light candles for villagers long gone, you realize something. This is the first place where you're not waiting. Not waiting for a verdict, or for food, or for pain. You're just living. One day, Edgar brings you a bundle of pages. He's tried writing his own story. It's mostly drawings, scribbles, a knight with a potato-shaped head and a sword longer than his arm. You praise it like it's scripture. He beams. You ask what the knight's name is. He says, Wulfric. You stop breathing for half a second, then nod. Strong name, you say? Because it is. Later, in your small room, with its warped floorboards and roof that still leaks when it rains, you pull out a bit of charcoal and a scrap of parchment. You start writing. Not much, just names, dates, a few moments burned too deep to let go. You're not writing to publish, you're writing to remember. Because you were forgotten once, and you swore no one else would be. Not on your watch. Elsbeth, Ulfric, Torvin, Fenton. The boy with no name who died coughing in the corner before he ever learned yours. You write their names like spells, anchoring them to the world one scratch at a time. And when you're done, you fold the parchment. You walk to slide it behind a loose stone at the base of the altar. No one will read it, but the building will remember, and that's enough. You step back into the night. The stars are sharp, bright, cold. You tilt your head back and let them settle on your skin, and you whisper, I'm still here. And the sky, impossibly vast, seems to whisper back, so are we. Winter comes slower than expected. At first it only nips at the edges, cool mornings, longer shadows, a sharper wind curling around the church bell, but then it descends in full, heavy and indifferent, blanketing the village in a silence that reminds you too much of the dungeon. You find yourself watching the horizon more often, as if it might change, as if something or someone you lost might wander out of the mist and back into your life. They don't, but someone else does. It's early. The snow hasn't melted yet. Your breath fogs the glass as you press your face near the chapel window. From across the square, a rider approaches, slow, cloaked, face hidden. You don't move. You've learned the value of stillness. They dismount. Speak to a woman outside the bakery. She gestures toward the chapel. Your stomach knots, not out of fear, out of instinct. You open the door before they knock. She looks older than you, but not much. Her hands are red with cold, her hair braided beneath a waxed hood. She holds a letter. Your name is written on the outside. She doesn't smile. She simply nods and presses it into your palm like something sacred. I was told to deliver this if I ever passed through here, she says. Then she walks away. No explanation, no invitation for thanks, just silence. You close the door, unfold the letter. The ink is old, the parchment wrinkled. But the words, if you ever see the sun again, write the rest. They need to know. You always remembered. That's why you survived. It's signed Elsbeth. There's a second sheet tucked behind the first. Names, so many names, some you know, some you don't. A list of those lost. A ledger of those remembered. Your eyes blur, not from grief, but from relief. She made it. At least long enough to write this. At least long enough to pass the torch. You sit down at your workbench, once used to scrape candle wax or trim flowers, and you spread the paper out beneath the window. And for the first time you begin to write. Not just names, but stories. The boy who sang lullabies to no one. The man who whispered rhymes in the dark. The girl who stole a moment of silence and made it into a comfort. You write what they meant, what they lost, what they gave. You write as if the act itself is a rescue, and maybe it is. You spend weeks doing it. Pages pile up. You don't care if they're ever read. That's not the point. The point is that you write it down before it disappears, because memory is the only justice you have left to offer. Spring returns, the frost thaws, children run through the square again, their voices high and oblivious. You smile at them from the chapel steps, parchment in hand. You've begun carving names into the back wall, just one each week. No decoration, no sermon, just stone and a chisel. It takes hours, your hands bleed, but it feels right. And when people ask what you're doing, you say, giving the forgotten something permanent. One morning, a boy, barefoot and loud, asks if he can help. You hand him a sponge and a bowl of water. He scrubs the dust from the finished names, carefully, respectfully. He doesn't understand it yet, but someday he will. And that's enough. You're not the same person who once stared at a stone wall and named an iron ring Hugh, but you carry that person with you. You carry all of them, in every breath, every letter, every scar. You once said you wouldn't last a day in that place again. But now you know the truth. You didn't just last, you became something else. Something they couldn't break. A witness, a writer. A wall of names in a chapel that we'll never forget. And if no one else ever reads a word you've written, that's fine, because you did. And that was always enough. They come in twos now, not mourners, listeners, strangers who knock softly on the chapel door and ask, awkwardly, hesitantly, if the stories are true. You never say yes, you never say no, you just nod toward the back wall, toward the stone names, and let the silence answer for you. Some read the carvings aloud, some trace the lines with trembling fingers. One girl, no older than 13, whispered one of the names under her breath over and over like she was memorizing it for a song. You don't ask why they come. You don't need to. Because something about remembering makes people brave. Or at least curious. And you've stopped fearing their questions. You even sit with them sometimes, beside the wall, beside the names, and you tell the stories they don't find in any book. How Wulfric once carved tally marks into stone with a nail he'd hidden in his heel. How Elspeth could calm an entire cell by humming an old lullaby in a voice no plague could steal. How Torvin spoke in riddles not because he was mad, but because it kept the silence from swallowing him. You don't tell these stories for applause. You tell them because each word is another stone laid in the bridge out of that darkness. One morning you receive a parcel, wrapped in plain cloth sealed with wax. Inside, a worn journal. No name, no return. But the handwriting, you'd recognize it anywhere. Torvin, the mad poet, the prophet of rhyme, the ghost of the dark. Page after page filled with verse and sketches. Some nonsense, some not. One passage is underlined 3 times. A wall can cage, but a word can climb. Speak softly and take your time. You hold that journal like it might vanish, like if you blink, it'll turn to ash. You begin reading it aloud in the evenings after your cleaning is done. Some villagers stay to listen. Others sit outside the chapel just to hear your voice through the stone. The chapel isn't full, but it never was. What it is now is alive. And so are you, because there's breath behind your words again. Your hands no longer shake when you pick up the chisel. Your steps don't falter on the chapel stairs. You even laugh. A real laugh. When Edgar asks if you'll ever leave the village, you shake your head. Where would I go, you ask. He shrugs. Anywhere. Everywhere. You smile, and for the first time you consider it, not because you need to escape, but because you finally could. Still, you stay. Because the wall isn't done. Because the names keep coming, from letters, from visitors, from memory, and each one deserves a place, a mark, a moment. You carve one more name before the frost returns. It takes longer this time. You've grown older, your fingers ache in the cold. But when the last letter is carved, you sit back and trace it once, just once, then close your eyes, not in exhaustion, in peace. Because this name was your own. A reminder that you were there too. That you endured, that you remembered. And now, you can rest, not in stone, not in shadow, but in something gentler, something earned. You return to your room where the fire waits and the journal sits open to a blank page. You dip your quill and begin the next chapter. After the dungeon came the door. After the silence came the song. I was forgotten, and now I remember for everyone. Winter thickens, not in a cruel way, but in a way that slows everything down. The wind no longer bites, it exhales. The snow no longer falls in flurries, it drifts, soft and slow like feathers from a weary bird. Inside the chapel, the cold creeps in through the stone. You keep the fire lit longer these days. The bench nearest the hearth is always warm by evening, and that's where the children like to sit. Yes, there are children now. Not many, but they come, wide-eyed and pink-cheeked, sitting cross-legged while you read to them. Not sermons, not scripture, stories, the ones no one else tells. They ask questions like only children can. Did they escape? Did the rats really talk? Why didn't anyone save them? And the hardest one, why did they let it happen? You never lie. You never soften the answer. But you never let the darkness be the end of the tale. You make sure the stories always curve gently upward, toward some kind of light, even if it's only the light of memory. Because that's what you've become now. Not just a witness. A lantern. One night, after the children have gone and the fire has drawn down to embers, you notice a figure lingering by the back pew, older, hooded, still. You don't speak at first, neither do they. Then slowly, the figure approaches the wall of names. They reach out, not to touch but to hover, just above the carved stone. Then in a voice you almost recognize, they whisper, "I thought I'd been erased." You stand. The figure lowers their hood. Elsbeth, alive. Older, thinner, but unmistakably her. You don't move, you don't know how. She steps forward and embraces you. It's not dramatic, not tearful. It's tired and full. You sit by the fire. She speaks first. "I walked the long way, years longer than I meant to." You nod, she smiles. "You wrote it all down." "You told me to." She looks at the wall. "You remembered the names." "I remembered everything." Silence, then laughter. Not loud, but whole. You brew tea. The herbs are weak but warm. She drinks like it's a feast. She tells you where she went, where others went, who didn't make it. She pulls a folded page from her satchel. Names. More names. You don't cry, but your hand shakes as you take the page. You'll carve them. Slowly, carefully. She insists on helping. You show her how to hold the chisel again, like the old days. Only this time, the wall gives way easier, as if even the stone is ready to carry the memory. That night, you both sleep in the chapel. Not out of necessity, out of choice. Two souls who carried the weight of too much silence, finally resting somewhere that holds it with them. And in the morning, she leaves. No fanfare, no promise to return. Just a nod, a look, a warmth that stays in the stone long after her footsteps fade. You walk to the wall, trace your finger down the new names, and below them, carve a final one. Not a prisoner, not a martyr, just a witness, a voice. You sign it simply, remembered by the one who remained. And now the wall is full. It doesn't look perfect, it looks true, and that's more than most people ever get. You sit by the fire, you open the journal again. There are no more stories to tell, only one left to live. And maybe, just maybe, it doesn't need to be written. Because this time, the silence that surrounds you, it's not the dungeon, it's peace. And in that peace you whisper, "Sleep now." And finally, you do. You don't wake up to chains anymore. You wake to birdsong, not the loud kind, not the noisy caws of crows scavenging a battlefield. This is the quiet kind. Soft, rhythmic chirps that rise like breath curling against the frost on the window. They call you gently, not urgently. You sit up, your back creaks, your knees complain. But it's the ache of old age, not captivity. You smile at that. Another day, another chance to remember. You dress slowly. The same way you've dressed every day for the last 10 years. Wool tunic, thick boots, shawl over the shoulders. But you pause today and run a hand along the scarf folded near the door. The same one Elsbeth left behind on her last visit. You wear it now, not just because it's warm, but because it's hers. You step outside. The snow's gone, replaced by wet grass and muddy paths. The chapel roof still leaks, but you patched most of it. The tools you left out yesterday are still leaning against the wall, unchanged. Waiting. That's the thing about peace. It doesn't demand anything of you, it simply offers. And you, now, are someone who receives. You walk the familiar path to the wall. The names haven't faded. You trace each one just as you've done every morning. A ritual without prayer, but full of reverence. There are more names now than there are villagers. It's become a pilgrimage site. People come from towns you've never heard of with scrolls and quills and hearts bursting at the seams. They add names, whisper them like sacred psalms. Sometimes they bring stories. You write them down, sometimes they don't. You carve them anyway, because even nameless pain deserves a home. Children visit too. They run their fingers across the chisel lines like they're learning a Sikh language. You teach them to listen, to silence, to stories. One girl, May, asks why the names are crooked. You laugh, tell her the stone was stubborn, but really it was you. Your hands were still shaking back then. They still do sometimes, but not out of fear anymore. Only memory. You sit on the bench beside the wall, pull out a book, the last one, blank pages, waiting. You've resisted starting it, because the first one was about pain, the second about survival, and this one is about living. What do you even say when the world has finally stopped trying to end you? You stare at the page, a breeze lifts the edge, flips it forward, and then you begin. Not with your name, not with the prison, not even with Elsbeth or Wulfric or Torvin. You begin with light. There was once a day when the sun came back. I didn't know what to do with it, so I stood still and let it find me. You write until your hand cramps, until the candle burns low, until the dark settles not in dread, but in welcome. You close the book, press it to your chest, and for the first time in your life you think, this story doesn't need an ending, just rest. So you lie back, breathe in, breathe out, once more, just once more, and let it all go. The chains, the rot, the silence, the cell, let it fall away like smoke from a fire long gone. Because you are not a prisoner anymore. You are the one who remembered. And the wall will remember you too. You are buried under the chapel floor. Not beneath the altar, no, you insisted on the back corner. Quiet, humble. The place where the wind sneaks in through the stone and makes the candles flicker just slightly. You always liked that corner. Said it reminded you of breath. They buried you with the book, the last one. Unfinished, because that was the point. Some stories are never meant to close. Above you, the wall still stands. No plaque, no dedication, just names. Hundreds now, all carved by different hands, in different languages with different rhythms, but they all hold the same weight. Remembrance. No one calls it the dungeon wall. They call it the memory. Children recite names like poems. They don't know who Elsbeth was, or Wulfric, or Torvin, but they say the names like they matter. Because they do. And because of you. The chapel has changed. The villagers keep it warm now. Fixed the roof, added benches, a little shelf in the back for tea and bread. Sometimes people just sit there, even if they don't believe in anything. They say the quiet helps them think. No one forgets who you were. But more importantly, they remember what you did, and that's what you always wanted. No statue, no hymn, just the truth. One boy, no more than 10, asks one day, who carved the first name? The old caretaker smiles, says someone who got out, but left the door open behind them. And that's how they talk about you now, the one who remembered, the one who walked back through the dark not to escape, but to carry others into the light. The wall is full, but they don't stop coming, not just with names, but with fragments, a ribbon, a lock of hair, a carved button, smoothed by years of thumb rubbing. Tiny things, each placed beneath a name, or in an open nook of stone, as if the chapel has become a second graveyard for the forgotten. No one dares call it a shrine. It isn't sacred in that way. It's sacred because it's honest, because no one here is perfect. They are broken people, remembered by another broken person who never let go of the truth, that dignity doesn't begin with rank. It begins with being seen. The village that once barely noticed the chapel now centers around it. People arrive in carts, some on foot, from distant towns, from cities, some with voices choked by history too heavy to carry alone. They speak, others listen. And you're still here. Not in body, but in the pause before someone says a name, in the candle that flickers near the base of the wall. In the stories whispered between strangers who feel less alone because you once said, "Me too." Edgar, the boy who once drew knights with lopsided swords, he's older now, taller. He's the caretaker, keeps the tools sharpened, teaches others to carve letters, not just to mark the names, but to honor them. Every first snowfall, he lights a lantern and sits beside your resting place. He reads the first journal aloud. Your words, your pain, your triumph, and always someone listens. A traveler, a child, a weary soul who just needed one more reason not to disappear. And when Edgar finishes, he touches the stone where your name rests beneath the floor and says, "You made space for us." And the air in the chapel shifts, because even the walls remember. Outside, time keeps marching. Wars begin and end, monarchs change, languages shift, but the wall stands, and with it, your legacy. Not of survival, but of witness. You didn't just escape the dungeon. You taught the world what it meant to be imprisoned and still choose kindness. You carried silence like a coffin, and then cracked it open with a chisel and a whisper. So now, when they say your name, they do it like a promise. Soft, certain, unshakable. The wind carries voices now, not cries, not orders, just soft threads of sound, the kind that hang in the air after a story is told, lingering like steam above morning bread. Visitors kneel near the wall, some in prayer, others just thinking. Some leave pebbles on the ground. One man leaves a loaf of bread every week. No note, just a gift. As if feeding someone who can't eat is still a way to say thank you. The chapel is never empty anymore. Even at midnight, someone is always there. Reading, writing, carving. One night, a girl, no older than 8, sits beside Edgar with a candle stub cupped in both hands. She asks him if the wall is magic. He smiles, says, "Only because someone believed remembering could break a spell." And she nods. Because children understand magic better than adults do. She writes a name on a slip of cloth. Her grandfather's. A man no one in the village had ever heard of. She places it beside a carved stone gently. Then she whispers, "Now he won't be lonely." Outside, the seasons move. The trees bend and bloom. The orchard where you once raked in silence now grows straight and tall. The fruit is small but sweet. People gather there in the summer, tell stories under the branches. They say things like, "He used to work here," as if that somehow blesses the ground. Your journals were copied, distributed, quietly. No publisher dared profit from them. They passed hand to hand, scribbled and shared. In cities, people read them aloud in basements. In villages, they're bound with twine and hidden beneath floorboards, just in case remembering ever becomes dangerous again. One copy sits on a noble shelf, unread, dusty, but still there, waiting. And your story keeps growing, not because it's glamorous, but because it reminds people they are not alone. You never asked to become that. You never wanted to be anything more than free. But sometimes freedom echoes louder than power, and your voice, once so quiet you feared it was gone, has become the thing that holds others steady. The chapel's walls now stretch into the future. Not literally, but in meaning. What began as survival became sanctuary. What began in chains ends in community. And what began with silence ends in stories that will never fade. The road to the chapel has a name now. They call it Remembrance Way. It's a simple path, stone-lined, flanked by wind-worn wooden posts and low shrubs that bloom in spring with tiny white flowers. No statue marks its start, no archway, just a small wooden sign hand-carved, faded by rain and reverence. Visitors walk it slowly. Some pause halfway, as if needing to decide whether they're ready to face what waits at the end. The chapel itself hasn't changed much. It's still squat, still crooked, still singing its silence between the cracks. But now there's laughter inside sometimes. Even music. Even light. And every time it echoes through the rafters, the walls seem to breathe just a little, like they're letting go of something they've carried for far too long. You're part of that now. Not in the flesh, but in the way someone might say he sat there, or that was his bench, or he used to hum when he swept. Small stories, quiet truths. You live inside them now. One boy brings a chisel every Sunday. He's careful, too careful. Each letter takes him hours, but he says it's worth it. Because it has to be perfect. He's carving the name of a woman he never met, his great-grandmother, a girl who once survived a famine, married too young, and raised 5 children in a town that forgot her. Until now. Someone asked Edgar once why the chapel doesn't expand the wall, why they don't tear it down and start a bigger one. He shook his head. Because it's not the size of the stone, it's the weight of what we remember. And everyone understood. Even the silence did. That winter, the first snow fell soft and early. The candles burned longer than they were meant to. And in the quiet that followed, someone opened your journal again and read aloud your first words. Hey guys, tonight we step into a place where time dies slowly. The children laughed at that. The older ones smiled, and someone whispered, he always did know how to begin. Because that was your magic. You didn't save the world. You simply told the truth about it. And in doing so, you gave people back the pieces of themselves they didn't know were missing. No golden ending, no parade, just this. A bench, a breeze. A name on the wall and the sound of someone being remembered. Forever. Years pass like pages, softly, invisibly. And yet when you look back, the book is full. The chapel has become more than a place, it's a ritual, a rhythm. Travelers begin their pilgrimages by candlelight, some carrying names tucked into lockets, others holding nothing at all, just silence and the need for it to be heard somewhere. One woman arrives with nothing but a strip of cloth torn from her grandmother's shawl. She stands before the wall, eyes closed, and places the cloth beneath the name of someone she's never met. Then she whispers, for the ones who were never believed. And the wall accepts it, because by now it's not just stone and carvings. It's alive, not with breath, but with memory. Some nights Edgar hosts vigils, not for religion, but for reflection. A time to sit, to remember, to grieve in peace without needing to perform it. He still tends the chapel, still sweeps the floor. Still touches your name every morning with 2 fingers, softly, like waking an old friend. He's older now. Gray creeping into his beard, his steps are slower, but his voice, steady as ever. And when asked why he keeps doing this, he answers, because he kept the door open. I'm just making sure it stays unblocked. Visitors leave offerings but not coins. They leave stories, written on scraps, tied in twine, tucked into cracks. Some are long, some are just names. Some are apologies no one ever heard. And every so often, Edgar gathers them, copies the words into the same book he once started, and stores the rest in a cedar box beneath the altar. He calls it the second ledger, because even memories need a place to rest. One spring, a young girl sits by the wall and begins reading every single name aloud. It takes her 2 days. No one asks her why. No one stops her. And when she finishes, she closes her eyes and says, now no one's alone. That night, a storm rolls in. Lightning strikes a tree near the chapel. The roof leaks again. The wall shakes but does not fall. In the morning, they find one of the newest names washed clean. It's not a loss. It's a reminder that remembering isn't about permanence. It's about persistence. And yours still persists. A merchant carves your story into the bottom of every crate he ships, just one sentence. Don't forget who was forgotten. A potter in a neighboring town seals your words into the glaze of his cups. A boy in the city writes a play based on your journals. He names it The Lantern Keeper. And when people ask who you were, what you did, you're never described as a hero. You're described as something rarer. The one who saw. And that's all you ever wanted. Not glory, not escape, just to be seen and to return the favor. Even now you are. Even now, you do. The wall hums with names you've never spoken. Not because you forgot them, because they weren't yours to remember, until now. A group of strangers arrive one afternoon, tired, sunburned, and quiet. They've come from the coast, far, with carts, children, and something deeper in their silence than sorrow. They ask if the chapel allows new names. Edgar opens the door. They don't write anything at first. They sit, for hours. Then, just before sunset, one man stands. He approaches the wall, and without saying a word, he takes a small stone from his coat, carves one name, shaky, crooked, but real. Others follow. By nightfall, there are 7 more. Edgar asks who they were. The man says, those who never made it inland, but who still mattered. And just like that, the memory expands, not just inward, outward. The wall becomes a map, a convergence, a home for every name that didn't get one. You're spoken of now in places your feet never touched. A cathedral in the north reads a passage from your journal every year on the winter solstice. They say the cold reminds them of how deep forgetting can bury a soul, and that you pulled people back from that. In the east, a school names its library wing after you, a quiet room, low windows, soft chairs. The quote above the door reads, "Light doesn't shout, it whispers, and saves us anyway." You would have smiled at that, you'd have laughed a little, but you'd understand, because you never wanted a statue. You wanted space, for truth, for stories, for broken people to walk in as strangers and leave knowing they were seen. And now, you've given them that. Edgar grows older. His hands shake more. He stops carving, but he trains others. He shows them how to hold the chisel, not too hard, not too soft. "You're not carving into the stone," he says. "You're carving out the silence." And when he can no longer climb the chapel steps without help, they carry him, because some bridges must never be allowed to close. And you're still there, in every hand pressed to the wall. In every breath someone dares to take when they thought their story didn't matter. You're the echo inside the stone, the pause before a name, the warmth behind the silence. You didn't change the world, but you gave it a place to rest. And maybe that's what saving it really means. They begin singing now. Not hymns, not anything formal, just simple tunes, folk songs, work songs, lullabies passed down like family heirlooms, too frayed to wear but too sacred to throw away. One woman stands at the wall and hums as she traces her brother's name. A child, not more than 6, sings nonsense words beside her, made-up syllables strung together with perfect intention. No one asks them to stop, because now the wall isn't just for silence, it's for sound too. Gentle sound. Sound that carries names further than memory alone ever could. And outside the chapel, people begin humming too. In fields, in markets, in alleyways. It's not a movement. It's a memory, set to rhythm. Someone paints your face once, not as a saint, as a man sitting on a bench, eyes closed, mouth slightly open, mid-sentence or mid-laugh, no one can tell. The painting is small, but it ends up in someone's kitchen, and then someone else's, and then everywhere. Not because you were perfect, but because you made people feel possible again. The chapel starts sending out letters, simple ones. They read, "If you have a name, we'll carry it. If you have a silence, we'll hold it. If you have a memory, we'll carve it into stone, so you don't have to hold it alone." The replies flood in, thousands, from places no one expected. A jailer writes, says he never knew what he was doing until your story gave him back his conscience. A noble's daughter sends coins, not to buy remembrance, but to support it. She asks if she can come help clean the floor. They say yes, she never leaves. And when they ask her why, she says, "Because I've been handed everything and still never felt seen until I walked through that door." At night, the stars above the chapel feel closer, as if the sky is kneeling to listen. You're still there, of course, in the grain of the bench, in the smoothed stone under 1,000 fingertips. And now, in the voice of every child who sits at the wall and whispers, "Tell me their name again." Because the wall isn't a monument, it's a conversation. And you're the one who started it. The chapel door never locks anymore. It creaks when it opens, always has, but now it creaks like a welcome. Like a sigh of recognition. Like the sound a home makes when someone steps in from the cold. People leave things behind, not out of forgetfulness, but as offerings. A scarf, a worn-out boot, a scrap of parchment with a name written in crooked letters, a braid of dried flowers tied with twine. No one takes them, no one moves them. They stay, tucked into corners and ledges like quiet prayers. The wall continues to grow, not upward, not outward, but inward. Every time a name is spoken, every time a story is told, every time someone sits in silence and allows themselves to feel what they tried to bury, that's when the wall expands. You're talked about now in places with gold-trimmed ceilings and glass-stained windows, in palaces, in poorhouses, in poems. They don't always say your name. Sometimes they just call you the remembered one. Sometimes they say the keeper. Sometimes they say nothing at all. Just trace their fingers through the air as if drawing your name in smoke. And somehow, That's enough. Edgar's hair turns white. His back bends like the roots of a tree bowing to time. He still walks to the chapel each morning, still lights a candle, still speaks your name aloud, as if doing so keeps the memory crisp, as if your voice will rise from the stone one last time and say, "Good morning." One day Edgar does not come. The villagers notice. They knock. No answer. Inside, they find him sitting on the bench, head tilted back, hands folded over his chest. He is not gone. Not really. He's just still, like you were, like the silence before a name. They bury him beside the wall. No plaque, just a stone, carved with one sentence, "The lantern never dimmed." And beside it, beneath your own name, someone adds 2 more words, "Never alone." The children begin a new tradition. They carry candles each winter, 1 per name on the wall. They walk the road in silence, hundreds of flickers, each one cradled like something living, each one honoring someone lost. And as they walk past the chapel, past the orchard, down the hill, and through the village, people open their doors, step into the snow, place hands on hearts, and listen. Because they know, because you taught them, not to fear silence, but to fill it, with memory, with kindness, with the kind of love that doesn't need to be loud to last. And the wall, it holds it all, still, always. And if you listen closely, you can still hear it breathe. You are legend now. Not the kind wrapped in gold and crowned with laurels, but the kind whispered beside fireplaces when the wind howls outside and someone asks, "Do you remember the one who carved the names?" And they do. Because remembering you has become a form of remembering themselves. It's in the way they speak more softly to the forgotten, the way they pause before throwing something away, just to wonder who once held it, the way they say names with intention, not out of duty, but reverence. The chapel stands. It leans a little now, weary with purpose. The floorboards creak more than they used to, but the light from the windows still stretches long and golden at the right time of day, casting shadows of the names across the walls like the memories themselves have weight. Children sit in those shadows, old ones too, and when they speak from within the wall now. It's not a list, it's a library, each name an entry, each visitor a voice. Your story, it's no longer just yours, it's theirs. It belongs to the boy in the orchard who saw your footprints in the mud and followed them to the truth, to the mother who carved her lost daughter's name beside yours because she said she felt safe there, to the scribe who copied your journals by candlelight, weeping quietly between every line. You are all of them now, and they are all of you. The sky shifts with seasons, the chapel gathers dust, but when the dust is wiped away, the letters underneath are as sharp as ever. And so, like you, they stay. Somewhere far from here, someone tells your story to a room full of strangers. Their voice trembles, not with fear, with honor. And when they finish, no one claps, no one speaks. They just sit, still, listening to the silence. And in that silence, something stirs. Something that sounds like your voice, but isn't. It's theirs, carrying your memory forward. Not because they must, but because they can. And long after the last name is carved, long after the last candle is lit, long after the last stone settles into the ground beside you, the story remains. Simple, unshaken, true. You were forgotten, but you remembered everyone else. And now, because of you, no one ever will be again.